Hello and welcome to the Simracing Corner, the Fanatec Club Sport Lite direct drive, but abbreviated to simply the CSL DD. That's what we're reviewing today, a very compelling wheelbase that promises racing game enthusiasts high-end direct drive force feedback, but at a more affordable price point over other options out there. We're going to take a deep dive into this wheelbase, firstly taking a look around the CSL DD on the table, then take it onto the track and discuss what it's like to drive, putting it through its paces in a few popular titles. So sit back and enjoy, let's get this started. Firstly, there is a link in the description to my full unboxing video for the CSL DD, but we're going to fast track through this footage, which is extracts from that original video. And while we do that, while we watch this, I want to start off and mention the wheelbase comes shipped with a standard 90 watt power supply that gives the CSL DD up to 5 Newton meters of torque output. For an additional cost, that can be upgraded to 8 Newton meters using the optional Boost Kit 180. This is merely a more powerful 180 watt power brick to maximise the full potential of the motor. The Boost Kit 180 power supply can be purchased later, but it's slightly cheaper to buy the CSL DD and the Boost Kit at the same time. I'm using the Boost Kit 180 with my CSL DD for the full 8 Newton meters of torque, and personally it makes complete sense to me to go down that path right off the bat. Why wouldn't you want to get the most out of this direct drive wheelbase? So just be aware my review is based on this setup. Weighing in at 5.1 kilograms without an attached wheel, the CSL DD does have a lot of heft. What we have is one big motor surrounded by an extruded aluminium housing. It's not entirely metal, the front and back faces are moulded plastic. The grooved sides give a unique look, but they are more than a design statement. The metal housing acts as an essential heatsink for the motor. These fins increase the surface area to allow heat to dissipate more efficiently. A fan is not required, it is entirely passively cooled. At the rear we have the connection sockets, the 4-pin power socket, a USB Type-C socket for the cable to run to your PC or console. The socket labelled data is another USB Type-C input, but is unused. Fanatec's manual described this as intended for future Fanatec peripheral products and warn you not to use it for any other purpose. The remaining RJ style sockets support Fanatec pedals, the Fanatec handbrake and the Club Sport shifter. The power button located in the bottom right enables you to access 3 modes of operation. When illuminated red, that's PC mode. Press it once more and it turns green for Xbox compatibility mode. And yellow is CSW compatibility mode, which is Fanatec's range of now discontinued premium belt driven wheelbases. Essentially an emulation fallback mode if you discover game compatibility issues in PC mode. The CSL DD uses the proprietary Fanatec quick release system that works exclusively with the Fanatec brand of wheels and hubs. As applies with any other Fanatec wheelbase, the CSL DD does require a Fanatec wheel or Fanatec hub to be connected to work. The wheelbase actively recognises the electronics built into the Fanatec wheel or hub. Without that, the CSL DD is merely a large paperweight. An advantage of a direct drive motor, with it being a single mechanical moving part. The steering column and thus the wheel is directly connected to the motor. There's no gears or belts involved. Fewer moving parts equals lower friction, and that's good for the force feedback detail. That's something we'll talk about later. The CSL DD is powered off and spinning the wheel is completely smooth and spins freely and silently. There is no hint of any notchiness that you would typically get with a gear and belt driven wheelbase. With the motor turned on, it remains smooth and silent. The wheel is being bounced the opposite direction, repelled by the soft stop. For mounting, Fanatec have been very smart about this with multiple possibilities. The wheelbase doesn't come with a table clamp, but that can be bought separately. The table clamp is plastic but is chunky and strong and actually does a fair job at holding the heavy wheelbase in place. It's not the best way to mount the CSL DD, it's not perfect. The high forces from the direct drive motor using a table clamp will flex the mount at times, and the sturdiness of the desk or table is equally as important for this type of setup. M6 sliding T-nuts are included with the wheelbase for hard mounting, and hard mounting is always best. The T-nuts can be positioned along the channels to make short work of getting the wheelbase mounted to pretty much any wheel stand or sim rig. In addition, side mounting is also possible. The T-nuts slide in here too. Fanatec have taken their inspiration from how aluminium profile pieces join together. It's a practical and sturdy solution that works extremely well here. Mounting a wheelbase can sometimes pose a challenge, so hats off to Fanatec, they've covered all angles perfectly. The driver software needed to run the CSL DD includes the Fanatec control panel. Here are your various fine-tuning adjustment options. These adjustments are at the driver level, which is to say anything you set here will be in addition to any in-game force feedback settings. So these settings do have a significant bearing on the overall force feedback being delivered. The feel of force feedback is very subjective to each individual, so it's something you will need to experiment with, and potentially on a per game basis you'll be visiting the control panel to tweak something which may be required. If you keep the Fanatec control panel open in the background while you're running a game, you can Alt-Tab to the control panel here and make on-the-fly changes, which is very useful. I always run the force feedback strength at 100% in the driver software and adjust the in-game force feedback setting to my liking there. The default setting for the damper is set at 50%, which I would say is too much. Although it does an effective job at taming the wheel oscillation, it also slows the wheel down and reduces the clarity of the force feedback detail coming through. So I would suggest the first thing you do is reduce the damper setting before anything else. I'm still experimenting with some of the sliders from time to time, so don't take the settings shown here as any definitive recommendation, but indeed, these are the settings I have been running recently. Under the tuning menu, you can store 5 different custom presets. That's very useful if you find a particular game requires very specific settings. Alternatively, you can use the Fanalab software for managing your custom wheel settings. This is a separate application. It doesn't replace the Fanatec control panel. This is just a more sophisticated wheel driver settings manager, ideal if you have a lot of racing games. Another useful thing to know is Fanalab is supplied with predefined tuned presets for different games. You may find what's provided is perfectly sufficient for your needs. However, multiple profiles per game can be stored along with exporting and importing profiles, making it possible to easily share settings between users. If you click on recommended FFB settings, that takes you to a web page with Fanatec's recommended in-game force feedback settings, a very useful resource to get you up and running. That was just a brief look at the software. There's a lot more going on here, which I'm not covering. I just wanted to show you a general overview of the supporting software available for the wheelbase. And now onto the main feature, the game testing and how well the CSL DD has performed over the last few weeks. I ran several driving games on my PC over this period and experienced 0 compatibility issues, and that's something that can't be said for all other direct drive wheelbase brands with every game out there. Fanatec has an advantage being a popular mainstream brand. Hardware support from developers should be guaranteed. Also, native console support is currently unique to Fanatec's range of DD wheelbases. The CSL DD, alongside the Windows PC compatibility, the wheelbase is fully Xbox compatible. A PlayStation compatible edition of the CSL DD is coming at some point in the future too. The force feedback strength and detail produced by a direct drive motor is a huge step up over any gear or belt driven wheelbase. And only until you've experienced a direct drive wheelbase for yourself will you fully realise that driving games output a considerable amount of layered and complex effects beneath the surface. A lesser wheelbase is able to transmit the main strong force feedback effects, but many underlying subtle effects are completely absent. Indeed, even those strong effects have a limited range of depth, and the strong effects often wipe out the weaker ones. Those wheelbases using small motors with belts and gears to increase the torque output, these are limiting factors. There are more moving parts and friction. It has a mechanical damping effect on the force feedback, an impediment a direct drive motor is not susceptible to. This is why direct drive wheelbases exist, and what does this mean for the user experience? I'm feeling the texture and friction of the road surface, every bump on the track, the suspension of the car as the weight shifts, and the loading forces on the tyres being pushed into the tarmac while rotating the car. The motor has the strength and fidelity to output layers of individual effects at the same time. You can feel it all at once, and I'm able to single out these different sensations. Nothing gets washed out. These complex physical interactions are continually changing because of the direct effect of your wheel and pedal input, resulting in the force feedback returning real-time dynamic sensations. If you're overly aggressive taking a corner, you can feel the tyres begin to lose traction through the force feedback, and you still have time to make adjustments to save the back end slipping out, and as stability returns, you feel that through the wheel. On each consecutive lap, you'll have a better understanding where the limits lay. The force feedback output is returning exact and distinguishable sensations as a direct result of how you're operating the car. And from this, you're able to feel your way around the track. It's repeatable and consistent. It helps you learn the track and the car, giving you confidence to lean on that force feedback as a powerful driving aid. Hitting a curb or bumpy section of track, and you get a precise sense of impact of that feature and the effect on the stability of the car. All these track elements are unique physical obstacles, and the force feedback output is equally unique, as are the characteristics of each car. And again, this is something direct drive force feedback is able to convey. The CSL DD fully delivers where it counts, and as a result, racing games feel more lively and exciting. Once you've tried it, anything less feels limp and toy-like. Despite its potential peak torque output at a mere 8 Nm, that number may sound quite low compared to other direct drive alternatives offering 2 to 3 times more power. Though I do find it quite unlikely many will find the CSL DD isn't powerful enough. It is indeed a strong motor. Believe me, take a spin around Nordschleife, you will be fighting the wheel and will wear you out, I promise you. I personally know 2 sim racers who have replaced their 20 Nm Fanatec DD1s for the CSL DD and prefer the CSL DD. It provides the level of power outputs for their needs and an equal level of force feedback fidelity, plus an advantage of a smaller footprint, making it more convenient for mounting. During my long play sessions, the wheelbase felt only slightly above ambient temperature, so overheating will not be a problem for the CSL DD. As I mentioned earlier, the wheel rotates smoothly, and in use it remains so. The only resistive forces are purely coming from the force feedback, which is exactly how I like it. If you feel you need more weight while turning the wheel to imitate the natural mechanical resistance of the steering rack, you can simply apply that in the Fanatec software. Though do be aware, adding resistance in this way does diminish fine force feedback effects. Also note, if you turn off or use low damper settings, you may experience significant wheel oscillation if you release the wheel. There is no sensation of oscillation while holding the wheel, so there is no concern of this unless you simply let go. Personally, I usually ran the damper setting turned off in the Fanatec software, opting for crispier force feedback effects and a faster rotating wheel. Mounted to a sturdy sim rig, the only movement from the wheelbase is the rotation of the steering column. The wheelbase in itself is as reassuringly solid as it appears. However, you may experience a tiny amount of play from the wheel rim quick release. This is not uncommon with the Fanatec quick release system. It is not flex, but the result of the tolerances between the connecting parts. The play is limited to the lateral plane and not on the rotation, so it had no impact on function or produced any rattle, and not something I detected while driving, so not really a negative as such, but an imperfection all the same, so worth mentioning. As I spin the wheel quickly, the on-screen wheel appears accurately synced to the physical wheel through my eyes, so that's a pass for my simple device input lag test. Of course, that doesn't take into account screen input lag, which is something else entirely, but not a problem for my gaming monitor here. Okay, I think that's enough testing. Let's move on to my conclusions. The CSL DD price to performance ratio is outstanding, indeed unbeatable. You get the very same benefits that come with all direct drive wheelbases, the precise, detailed and immersive force feedback, plus robust build quality, but at a much more attractive price point. That's not to say committing to the CSL DD is cheap. You need to still add a wheel and pedal set, and that can easily double the price of your investment. But this still remains the cheapest way to get a direct drive setup right now. The CSL DD is essentially marketed as an entry-level direct drive system, but quite frankly, there's nothing entry-level about it. It is a spectacular performer in its own right and fully deserves the high praise it's receiving in the many reviews out there. I'm certain the majority of racing game enthusiasts who try the CSL DD won't consider they need anything of a higher tier than this, and possibly this will be the last force feedback wheelbase they'll ever buy. Fanatec have completely disrupted the market by releasing an affordable direct drive wheelbase. That's great for the consumers. On the flip side, places pressure on the competition. I do wonder how long the CSL DD will remain a problem to the competition into the foreseeable future. In fact, I can't help feel the CSL DD may be a problem for Fanatec selling their own DD1 and DD2s when their cheapest model does such a good job. Do believe the hype, guys, the CSL DD is that good. I'm not sponsored, I bought this myself, my review is totally independent, and I'm certainly not a fanboy to any company. This will be the 7th brand of wheelbase I reviewed on the channel, and I also own a premium Leo Bodner Sim Steering 2DD. So I do have some experience on this subject, and I've been nothing but impressed by what I have in front of me. Fanatec have knocked it out of the park with this one. It is a killer product, it is as simple as that. And that was my review for the Fanatec CSL DD. Please drop comments below the video and share your thoughts, whether you own this wheelbase or not. It's always great to hear your opinions. And do feel free to ask any questions that may have not been covered, and I'll try to answer to the best of my knowledge. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit the like if you found it useful. It really does help my small channel, so I do really appreciate that support. I'll be back soon with something new, so until then, happy simming and bye bye.